Hello, today on my channel you will hear an amazing story about life. I hope you enjoy this story. This one struck me to the core. Honestly, I still can't forget it. Enjoy watching.
35-year-old Leslie was cooking dinner in the kitchen when her 12-year-old son Austin ran into the apartment. The boy was in an agitated state. He tried to say something to his mother, but the woman could not make out the incoherent speech of the boy. And then excited Leslie sternly said, "Have a glass of water and calm down, or I have the feeling that you have met a ghost." The boy obediently complied with his mother's request, and only then was he able to tell what had so disturbed him. Austin uttered, "You know our fifth-floor neighbor Julia, right? I also help her carry bags upstairs. So today I carried her again, volunteered to help her, and when the woman was already a floor up, I stopped to take a break. And then I got curious that I carry half a year to the top floor, and so I looked quietly into the bag and there." "What did you see?" the woman asked cautiously. And soon she opened her mouth in surprise at her son's answer. A few minutes later, surprise was replaced by indignation. Leslie immediately decided to deal with an elderly neighbor who lived on the fifth floor. The woman knew that her son often helped Julia, who was considered a bit odd by the tenants of the house. Leslie was not against Austin helping the neighbor. She and her husband were only for the fact that their child is not growing up a soulless man and is ready to help people in a difficult moment. But her son's story today about what he was carrying upstairs angered the woman. Leslie took off her apron, rinsed her hands, and resolutely went to the neighbor. The woman went up to the fifth floor and pushed the bell button. A few minutes later, Julia opened the door for her. The landlady looked at the guest with a smile and said welcomingly, "What brings you to me?" "I came to scold you for letting my son carry weights that are unacceptable to keep in the apartment, considering that Austin has been carrying these bags every 3 days for 6 months. I'll ask you not to use child labor for selfish purposes anymore," Leslie said sternly. "Your boy is a very kind boy. I didn't force him to help me," he volunteered. "To be honest, I have long forgotten what human kindness is, and your son reminded me of it," said the old woman, and tears came to her eyes, which soon flowed one after another down her cheek. Leslie was not prepared to bring her neighbor to tears. The woman felt uncomfortable in this situation. She felt unbearably sorry for Julia, and she said quietly, Pardon my harshness. You must have had a lot of grief in your life to talk about human kindness like that. I don't even know what to say. Why don't you come and talk to me? It seems to me that such a kind Austin must have wonderful parents," said the old woman in a low voice, and looked at her with a look of anguish. It was this look that convinced her to accept the invitation of the neighbor from the fifth floor. And in a few minutes, Leslie was sitting on a chair in a sparsely furnished one-room apartment. The old woman offered her guest tea, but she refused. And then Julia suddenly said, "I know I'm considered a strange woman. You may not object to me for the sake of propriety, since you also have such an opinion of me. And especially, you have learned today that your son helps me to carry. Yes, the contents of the bag amaze me, I won't hide it. But now I look at you and it seems to me that you're in a difficult state of mind. I dare not demand that you tell me about yourself, but sometimes it is the best way out in some situations, such as yours," Leslie said. "Are you sure you want to know about me?" the old woman asked in amazement. She was used to know. When Julia was 11 years old, she suffered a spinal injury while skating on the ice. The girl was in the hospital for a long time, and after discharge, the doctor informed her parents that figure skating the child will have to quit. At that moment, when the girl learned about it, she turned in tears to her mom and dad. "I dreamed of a career in this sport. Can I continue figure skating? Did you hear what the doctor said? Thank God the doctors fixed you up, or you'd be in a wheelchair later," said her mother. Time slowly moved on, and soon Julia finished 11th grade. The girl's mother dreamed that her daughter followed in her footsteps and entered a teacher training institute. However, Julia had no desire to teach lessons at school. The girl dreamed of the profession of confectioner. About this she informed her parents. Father took the news silently, but Selena was indignant and spoke out. "What kind of profession is that? Are you going to bake cakes and make cream all your life? Listen to what your mother tells you. You'll get tired of standing behind the stove in married life. Then you'll hate your job." "Mom, but it's my choice. I like to cook culinary masterpieces. Please accept my choice," the girl said. Selena had no choice but to agree with her daughter's decision. At the end of the conversation, her mother only told the girl that later Julia would regret that at one time did not listen to her mother. Soon Julia entered the culinary college and with great pleasure began to master new disciplines. The girl went to study always in a good mood because she dreamed that as soon as she got a profession, she would become the best cook in the city. 2 months passed as Julia entered college, and one day returning from her studies, she saw a guy trying to remove a cat from a tree. The young man called the pet affectionately by its nickname and then jumped up, trying to grab onto the branch. The girl moved closer to the guy and pronounced, "In this way you are unlikely to get the cat out of the tree. You have another suggestion, then tell me," said the stranger, turning to the girl who spoke. "Here, take a sandwich with sausage and try to lure the cat. By the way, is that your pet?" she said. "Of course it's my cat. I wouldn't be chasing other people's cats around here. It's just that we recently moved here. I opened the window to ventilate, and Mirka jumped through the window, and this is the result. She's sitting in a tree, scaring the whole neighborhood with her meow. I've been here for an hour, like an orangutan jumping near the tree," said the guy sadly. "Take a chair from the house and try to reach the kitty with it," said Julia. "That's a good idea. Then stay here, watch for Mirka, and I'll be right back," said the young man, and at the same moment ran into the entrance. The boy was gone for about 7 minutes, and soon he climbed up on a chair and carefully pulled the cat by the scruff of the neck from the branch. The young man turned to the girl and thanked her for her advice, and then held out his hand for introduction and said, "My name is Harry, and yours?" Julia answered the girl modestly. "A beautiful name and very rare nowadays. If you don't mind, I'll take this savage together with the chair home and we'll continue our acquaintance. How do you like my offer?" the boy said. The girl looked at her new acquaintance, who smiled at her. She hesitated for a moment and then accepted the guy's proposal. Soon the couple was walking in the park. The young man told her that he came here from another city. He worked as a bus driver. He was 25 years old. After Harry's narration, Julia narrated about herself. The young people walked for about 2 hours, and after the girl said that it was time for her to go home, as her parents would be worried that she was gone so long from college. Hearing this, Harry jokingly said, "You've got a lot of control, and you're not a little girl. We'll always be small to our parents. Isn't that right?" Harry said seriously. "Well, you're already philosophizing. Okay, let's go to walk you home, or you'll be treated by your parents for being late," said the young man. "My parents never physically punished me. I had enough of a stern voice of mom or dad to realize that I made a mistake. And after that, I never made such mistakes again," the girl said. "You're so right. It's getting scary," Harry said with a laugh, adding, "Do your parents let you give your phone number to guys, or do they have to know their daughter's boyfriends by sight?" "Stop mocking, of course. I'll dictate my number," said the girl. After a while, the girl came home. Her mother was already at home, and she asked where her daughter was so late. Julia lied to Selena that they had an extra couple in college, so she came home so late. The whole evening of that day, the girl thought about her new acquaintance. She remembered his friendly smile, his slightly hoarse voice. And when Julia went to bed, all of her thoughts were about the young man. The next morning, the girl woke up and remembered Harry again. She suddenly caught herself thinking about this man all the time. Julia involuntarily wondered, and maybe she fell in love with the guy at first sight. On this day, the girl in college was absent-minded. This was noticed by her classmates. One of the students even asked Julia, "Are you in love? You're always in the clouds. You have to ask the same question several times." Julia didn't say anything in response. She wanted to hear Harry's voice at the moment. And the guy, as if he read her thoughts at a distance, took and called. The young man said quietly, "Hey, right, what mom and dad will let you go out today. Are you pushing me again? I can manage my own time. Let's at 5 o'clock near the Cafe Ugolik. You know where it is?" said the girl. "We'll work it out. I'll see you later." Harry spoke quickly and disconnected the connection. The couple soon met at the appointed place. They walked around the city and talked about various trivia. The girl kept sneaking tender glances at the young man. Julia was more and more attracted to Harry every minute. The girl was courted at one time by guys, but she looked at the suitors indifferently, as she did not feel drawn to the cavaliers. But in the case of Harry, it was different. She did not want to part with a new acquaintance. The couple walked for about 2 hours, and the girl got a call from her mom. Selima inquired about the delay from college. Julia lied that she went to a friend's house to get an outline. All of this was heard by Harry, who said to his conversation partner with a smirk after the conversation ended, "You'll apparently have an oversight on your wedding night too." "Why do you say that?" the girl said resentfully. Am I not telling the truth if you are already conspiring an innocent walk with a guy? Harry said with a sneer and then added, "Come on, I'll walk you out already, or my mom's going to put out an APB." The girl was visibly offended, but tried to hide it from her companion. The couple walked to Julia's house without talking. When they came to the entrance, the young man only dryly said, "I have accomplished my mission and escorted like a true gentleman. Bye," and then only wanted to leave, as the girl called him by name. The guy stopped and looked intently at Julia, and then approached her closely and quietly said, "Now then prove that you are not a mama's girl," and after that he pulled Julia to him and kissed her on the lips. The kiss lasted a minute, and the girl did not push the young man away. Then Harry let go with the words, "I'm a man, and it's not enough for me. I hope you realize that." Julia instantly realized what the interlocutor was talking about. She nodded in response and ran home. The girl entered the apartment in a thoughtful mood. She liked Harry's kiss, and she even regretted that it was over so quickly. One thing only overshadowed Julia, that the events of the relationship had developed so rapidly. The girl dreamed of beautiful words, gallant courtship. As soon as Julia was at home, she was approached by her mother, who asked about the prospectus. The girl looked at Selena perplexed. She had completely forgotten that she had lied about the delay from college. The woman noticed her daughter's surprised look and reminded her that she had called her not long ago. The girl realized that she had given herself away, and so she muttered, "I deceived you. I was nigh at a friend's house and went out with a young man." "So yesterday was a lie?" inquisitively inquired the landlady. "Yes. However, Mom, I have the right to my personal space, and it seems to me that I fell in love for the first time with fervor," said the girl. "No one is not against your meetings with a young man, but to lie to your parents is not nice. We're not monsters. We're not monsters. My dad and I were young too, and we can understand you. Just don't lose your head in love, so that you don't become a single mother," Selena said. "Mom, I'm sorry. I was afraid to tell you the truth. I'll tell you all about Harry. He's a very nice man. I met him just yesterday," said the girl, and started telling her mom about the cat, and then how they went for a walk today. Harry hadn't called Julia after the last week for a few days. The girl pestered herself to think that something had happened to the boy. She couldn't stand it and dialed the number of the chosen one herself. Harry answered at once. Julia, hearing the voice of her lover, rejoiced and immediately said, "You disappeared strangely. You don't call, and I decided to find out if everything is all right with you. Did you miss me?" "And Mom and Dad permission did not forget to ask permission to call me," with a sneer said the interlocutor. "Why are you doing this again? My mom knows about you, so it makes no sense for me to ask permission to go out with a guy," quietly said the girl. "Wow, what unexpected progress. Okay, I'll meet you then, just like last time at the same place and time," answered the young man and hung up. And Julia smiled happily after the short conversation was over. The young people were walking again and went into a park where they secluded themselves. Here Harry pressed the girl against him and began to kiss passionately on the lips. Julia answered him ineptly. After a while, the guy with the hoarse voice from excitement said, "Let's go to my place with a sleepover. My mother went to check on my grandmother in the village, so you and I will not interfere with anyone." "I cannot so immediately," said the girl. "Oh yeah, I forgot. You haven't reported to your mom about going out for the night. Come on, baby, I'll walk you home." "I'll wait till you're older and then I'll call you," the young man said. The girl realized that Harry would do just that. Julia frowned, because the boy was right about one thing, that she always reported to her mother and father. And on the other hand, the words of the interlocutor sounded like blackmail, that if she did not agree to spend the night with him, their relationship could come to naught. The girl thought not long. She snatched the phone and called her mom and quickly spoke. "Mom, I'm not coming over for a sleepover tonight. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. Just remember that your daughter is all grown up." And with those words, Julia completely disconnected the phone and then looked at her lover. The guy smirked and pulled the girl to him and kissed her passionately again. Meanwhile, Julia's mother incessantly dialed her daughter's number, but the subscriber was out of range. The woman was disappointed with her girl's behavior. She had already guessed with whom her daughter would spend the night, but she could not change the events because she did not know where the guy lived. And Selena also imagined how she would tell her spouse that their child would not spend the night at home tonight. Julia spent this night in the arms of her lover. She was happy. The girl caught herself thinking that she had met a man with whom she wanted to live her whole life. In her mind, she was already making plans as soon as Harry would propose to her to become his wife. The next morning, Julia turned on her phone and saw 36 missed calls from her mother. The girl involuntarily clenched her eyes. She imagined what kind of conversation she would have with her parents. But Julia had to look at the chosen one, as she immediately threw the moralizing conversation with mom and dad aside. The girl was ready to endure everything only if the young man was always with her. Julia had no time to think about it. As the phone rang, it was Mom, who dryly said, "Waiting at home without being late from college." When classes were over, Julia walked home without mood. She didn't want to listen to her parents' remarks about her immorality. Julia entered the apartment and breathed a sigh of relief. Her mom hadn't come home from work yet. The girl quickly called the chosen one, and as soon as she heard the voice said, "I miss you already. So like the night of love. Coming today, we'll continue," the guy said. "Harry, I cannot. I still need to talk to my parents," said the girl, and immediately regretted her words, as she quickly realized that the guy will sneak on this occasion, and she was not mistaken. The young man said in response, "I didn't expect anything else." Julia, not thinking long after these words, changed her clothes and quickly wrote a note to her mom, in which she said, "Mammy, I love this man. Don't worry about me. Everything will be fine. Kisses to you and Daddy." As soon as the girl wrote the note and put it in a prominent place, she changed her clothes and left the apartment in a hurry. She thought only about one thing, to leave before her mom came back from work. And Julia managed to do it. She successfully avoided meeting her mom. The girl happily ran to her lover. She dreamed about the embrace with her beloved, and also about the fact that today she would tell the chosen one about her feelings. In response, Julia expected to hear the same thing. The girl did not even think about the other. The girl came to the chosen one in an excited state. She wanted to tell how she ran away from her parents. However, the young man was not interested in this. Julia was bruised by this circumstance, but she was able to hide this feeling. The guy just hugged the girl and commanded, "Since you missed me, then quickly to bed." Julia lived at the young man's place for 3 days, and then Harry told her that it was time for the girl to go home, since his mother was coming back from his grandmother. She did not expect this, as she thought that the lover would introduce his mother. Julia, in this regard, asked a question. "I thought we would be together now, because I went against my parents for you. Did anyone force you to do that?" The guy answered calmly, "Are you saying that I'm parallel to you? I thought that you and I love each other," quietly said the girl. "Stupid. I feel good with you, but no more." "Don't make more of yourself," Harry said. "Don't you love me?" she said, confused. "I told you I'm happy with you. Isn't that enough for you?" The boy answered nonchalantly. After these words, the girl felt irritation overwhelm her. Julia expected a declaration of love from the young man, but not this phrase. She felt tears coming to her eyes. The girl silently stood up and hurriedly left the apartment of her chosen one. Julia did not want the guy to see her tears. Only when she found herself on the street, she gave vent to her emotions. Julia burst into tears. Passers-by looked at her in surprise, and one man stopped the girl and asked if she needed help. Julia shook her head negatively and almost ran home. Julia entered the apartment. She knew that her mother had the day off today. As soon as she took off her shoes in the hallway, Selena jumped up and slapped her. The daughter looked at her mother with tearful eyes and without saying anything went to her room. The landlady followed the girl and then spoke in raised tones. "Silence is not the best option here. Tell me everything. Do you have any idea how worried your father and I were about you? Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" "Mom, you better hit me one more time, but do not torment my soul," barely audible daughter said. "What happened?" the mother asked in a calmer voice. Julia sobbed and said that she was madly in love with Harry, but she thought the boy was indifferent to her. Selena listened to the girl and mouthed, "And it's no wonder that this young man treats you like this. After all, you've known him for a week and you've already jumped into bed with him. I can even imagine what he thinks of you. I can tell you out loud, the guy thinks you're available. And it's all your fault and no one else's," the woman said darkly. "Mom, but you don't understand. I love him. I only want to be with him. I need him," Julia said, crying. "Wipe your tears, or better yet, wash your face. The only thing I can tell you is not to call him first. You should have some pride," Selena said. After this conversation with her mother, several days passed. On her mother's advice, Julia did not call her lover, but every day after classes at college, she walked past the house where Harry lived. The girl hoped that she would be able to meet the guy, but it did not happen. Julia endured a couple more days of separation from Harry and then could not resist, and the first called him. The young man did not answer immediately. The guy said, "Lost and found? You're the one who's probably lost. You don't call me," Julia said glumly. "I was just out of town. I went to my mother's house to help her get home. I missed you, by the way. I have a proposal to meet now and go for a walk to one place," the young man said. The girl was glad that Harry said that he missed her. Julia immediately agreed to meet, and soon the pair met. The girl asked the man what place he wanted to go with her. The guy explained that it was necessary to look at a couple of garages. Julia looked perplexed at Harry and asked what it was for. The young man explained, "I'm going to buy a garage, and before I buy it, I need to choose a suitable one." "But you do not have a car," naively asked the interlocutress, and added, "Then why do you need a garage if you don't have a car?" "To take you there, we have to meet somewhere," the guy said. The girl only wanted to take offense, but Harry hugged her and said he was joking. Julia breathed a sigh of relief and asked him not to make any more jokes like that. A few days later, Harry actually bought a garage and invited the girl to spend the night there. Julia at first wanted to refuse, but the desire to be in the arms of a loved one took over, and she agreed. At home before leaving, she went to her mom and said that tonight she would spend the night at her boyfriend's place. Selena already knew that her daughter had made up with her lover, so she did not interfere with Julia's decision. At that time, the woman did not know that her child would spend the night in the garage. And the girl, seeing that her mother did not hinder, rejoiced and promised her mother that in the very near future, she would bring her lover to visit for acquaintance. 3 months passed as Julia met with the guy. During this time, she repeatedly spent the night in the garage at Harry's. There on an old sofa, they made love. The days for these meetings were always set by the young man. The girl several times tried to persuade her lover to go to visit her to get acquainted with her parents. The young man agreed, but at the last moment he had good reasons and the visit was postponed. Meanwhile, Julia's mother often said to her daughter, "I don't really understand your boyfriend. When a man has serious intentions for his chosen one, he tries to get closer to her family. And your lover is just some busy gentleman, cannot find time to come for an hour to visit us. By the way, how does his mom react to you sleeping over?" Normal lied to her mother's daughter. She was embarrassed to tell Selena that she had never seen Harry's parent. That evening, Julia was going to the garage to her favorite person with a determined mood to talk about their relationship. As soon as the girl saw Harry, she spoke. "How long are we going to huddle in this garage? You and I only meet here and stop going out. My mom keeps asking me about you, and I can't say anything concrete. You're not in a hurry to introduce me to your mother either. I'm sick of this secretive relationship." "Really?" With a squint, the man said, and then angrily threw, "If you are tired of my embrace, then no one keeps you here. Or maybe you think I'm going to marry you? Only I'm afraid to disappoint you. In my plans, at least in the near future, there is no intention to go to the registry office." The girl was dumbfounded. She expected everything, but not this. Julia jumped out of the garage and quickly headed home. Only now she realized that the chosen one not only did not love her, Harry did not even respect her. Julia held back sobs. At the moment, she was hurt and offended. The girl came home and saw her mother looking at her surprised. Celine asked her daughter a question. "I thought you were going to spend the night at Harry's? Did you two have a fight?" "You could say that. He doesn't love me one bit. Harry is completely indifferent to me," she said faintly, and tears sprang from her eyes. Selena approached her daughter and hugged her with the words, "If a guy does not appreciate your feelings for him, then, in my opinion, you should forget once and for all, and not run after him like a dog. It's easy for you to say, but I can't live without him," whispered her daughter. "So you haven't tried to live without him yet. I can see that as soon as he calls you, you fly away for the night. You have no pride. Clench your will into a fist and try not to think about him is the only and the right way out of your situation," said Selena. It had been 10 days since she had last seen her lover. She hadn't called her boyfriend, and neither had he. Julia often looked at her phone where Harry's picture was. The girl looked at the picture of the lover and cried. She did not know how to unlove this man. And one day Julia was returning home from school and walked the usual route near the house of the chosen one, as she saw Harry coming out on the arm with a pretty brunette. The girl stopped like a dumbfounded. It immediately occurred to her how quickly the guy had found a replacement for her. Julia jumped up to the couple and said with passion, addressing the young man, This is what you do, isn't it? You invite me to the garage and this doll to your house? After these words, Julia turned to Harry's companion. Why are you looking at me with a perplexed look? He probably forgot to tell you that he has no plans to marry anyone. Harry glared fiercely at Julia and mouthed to her. Go on your way and don't show your face here again. And don't talk nonsense to my fiancé. What about your fiancé? Julia was perplexed and then asked, What about me? The guy turned to his companion and said that he would talk to Julia alone and then explain everything to her. The brunette remained silent in response and only looked at her rival with a squeamish look. Harry took Julia by the elbow and took the girl aside and then explained to her. It's all your own fault. No one dragged you into bed. I already had a fiancée when I met you, but she was graduating and living in another city. I'm a man and I have needs, and then you came along. And admit to yourself that I never said any big words or made any promises to you, so don't make a concert here now. I gave you pleasure in bed, and you gave me pleasure in bed. I'm grateful for that, but now our paths are parted forever. Please don't stalk me. I think I've explained it to you very clearly. The girl couldn't understand that her favorite person had just said that to her. Meanwhile, the guy was already walking towards his companion, who took under his arm and began to say something. The couple continued their way, and Julia stood and looked at the young people in the wake. The girl felt that her feelings were simply trampled and in such a cynical form. Julia would have been glad to give vent to her emotions, but there were no tears. The girl stood for a while longer and then continued on her way home. She couldn't figure out who she should hate in this case, the guy, herself, or the brunette. Julia came home and went to her room, sat at the desk and looked out the window. How long she sat like that she does not remember. There were no thoughts in her head. In this position caught her daughter Celine. The woman called Julia, but she did not even react. Then the landlady approached the girl and lightly squeezed her shoulder. The daughter shuddered and looked at her mother with a devastated look. Selena realized that her daughter was in some kind of trouble. She asked Julia what had happened, and in response she heard, "There is no love in this life as I about men now," said barely audible. Daughter said, "Don't be silly. You must have had another fight with Harry. It's all right. You'll make up," the woman said. "Mom, I love him with all my heart, but he doesn't need me at all, because Harry has a fiancée and he had a girlfriend the whole time we were dating. You see, that's how it is," her daughter said in a dull voice. "I understand that you are hurting and hurt right now. Only time will help you. You will forget this person and on your way will meet your chosen one, who will love you, appreciate and respect you," said Selena affectionately. "I don't need anyone but Harry," said the girl. After this conversation, a few days passed, and Julia tried to call her lover, but he dropped the calls. And after some time, the dad changed this IN card, and the girl could not call her lover. Julia then tried to catch up with the young man near his house, but Harry, seeing her, said, "Do you have absolutely no pride? I told you in normal language I don't need you. Do you want me to call you bad names? If I see you here again, I will do so, and loudly, so that passers-by can hear." After this short conversation with the boy, the girl came home in a kind of daze. Julia's mother saw that her daughter was suffering and could not help her in any way. The woman tried to distract the girl from heavy thoughts, but Julia listened to her mother with a distracted look. A year had passed since the young people broke up. Julia was still suffering from her lover and often came to Harry's house to secretly look at the former favorite. She realized that her visits to the dwelling of the guy makes himself only more painful, but she could not help it. The girl hated Harry, but at the same time she continued to love him. Time flew by, and Julia finished her studies. She no longer went to the house of her former lover, but the girl tried to meet guys, but Julia did not want to start a new relationship. And here in the family there was still an unpleasant event that caused the girl's antipathy to the male sex. It's all about the fact that Julia's father met another woman and went to the divorcee. Selena strongly experienced a divorce from her spouse. After her husband left her, Selena complained of heart pains and was advised at work to go to a witch who lived in a small village nearby. The woman offered her daughter to go to the witch together. The girl did not refuse, and soon they were in a small village near a neat little house. The mother and daughter were met by a girl who was the same age as Julia. She took Selena and her daughter to a separate room where a woman of indeterminate age was sitting. Selena said hello and only wanted to say what occasion they were here, as she was interrupted by the lady of the house. "Wait for the blabbering. Let your daughter come to me." Julia looked perplexed at her mother and fulfilled the request of the woman, whose name was Maria. The witch asked the girl to give her her right hand palm up. Julia fulfilled the request of the witch doctor. The witch doctor studied the hand for a long time and then thoughtfully said, "You will not have an easy fate. You will have to experience a lot, but you will know happiness yet. True, it will happen not soon, and you'll do good for people. I can't tell you more, but know one thing, you must live." "You've veiled your prediction," the girl said, puzzled. "I told you that I can't say much, but I can feel the power coming from you, and only God gives that kind of power. You will understand everything in time in my words too. Know that your talisman is that earth and the straight road is not for you," said the witch, and then turned to Celine. "Give me your palm." Marita studied her hand, then stood up and took out some herbs and told her how to brew a healing potion. And then she said to Julia's mother, "Let your husband go in peace to the divorcee. Do not torment your heart with hatred for your husband. If you do not listen to me, my herbs will not help you and you will leave this mortal world. Think about what I'm saying. Your life is in your hands now." After the visit to the witch, about 3 months passed. Julia had already got a job as a pastry chef in a cookery shop, but Selena was having heart palpitations. Her daughter noticed it and saw her mother wrinkle her nose. The girl could not stand it and started a conversation with her mother. She said, "In vain we went to this witch. She did not say anything good. I can see that your heart is seizing. Daughter, you shouldn't talk about the witch doctor like that. That woman was right on the mark when she said that you should forgive and let your spouse go in peace. And I still can't do it," Selena said. "Mom, forget that cheater. I will never forgive my father for living with you for so many years and then leaving you. Thanks to my first love and my dad, I've come to hate the male sex. I do not believe now, guys, that they even know how to love really with fervor," said the girl. "Don't lump all men into one category. You shouldn't do that. In life there is a real love, when two halves find each other and live until old age together," said Selena. "Well, let's say that's true. But answer me then, why can't you forgive your father and hate him as much as I do?" said Julia. "It's a complicated question. I just love your father and can't forget him," said the woman faintly, and then she looked at her daughter, smiled at her and said, "But you ignore the male sex for nothing. You're young, beautiful, you need to organize your personal life, and you cherish agency from guys like the devil from the incense. I've had one crush for the rest of my life. Don't start talking about your love life, Mom. Maybe someday I will have a man, but I do not believe that I can love him so much," said the girl. 6 months passed and Julia was walking home from work when she saw an ambulance at the entrance. The young woman felt a vague uneasiness in her soul and then rushed home. At the stairwell, she saw 2 men in white coats carrying a stretcher where her mother lay. Julia shrieked and rushed over to Selena, who was unconscious. The girl screamed to the medical staff, "What's wrong with her?" "A heart attack. If you are a relative, you can come with us. But I warn you that the patient will be placed in the intensive care unit where you cannot enter," said the man in a white coat. "I agreed to wait in the corridor with tears in her eyes," said the girl. She prayed to God that her mother would only stay alive. After a while, Selena was hospitalized. The girl nervously paced the hospital corridor. She waited for the slightest news about her mother's condition. It was about 2 hours later when a doctor came out to see her. Julia rushed to him and folded her 2 palms on her chest and said, "Tell me that Mom is okay. I'm begging you. Be strong. We did everything we could, but your mom had a massive heart attack. We weren't able to save Selena. I'm sorry for your loss," said the doctor and went further down the hospital corridor, while Julia remained standing in the same place where she had just heard the sad news. The young woman walked along the wall to the couch and sat down on it, and then only cried. Soon a funeral was held where neighbors were present as well as Selena's co-workers. Many good words were said about the deceased and many wreaths and flowers were laid. Julia looked at it all with a devastated look. She realized that she was all alone in this life. And then she remembered how the witch had told her mother to let her husband go in peace, but her mother did not. The girl involuntarily shuddered because the words of the witch doctor turned out to be prophetic. After the funeral, the young woman became even more withdrawn. The girl now went only to work, and after a day of work hurried home, where no one was waiting for her. Julia felt that she was going crazy from the silence in the apartment, and that she decided to get a pet. The young woman found an ad in which it was written that a young family gives away kittens free of charge. In the evening, she went to the address and returned home not alone, but with a small red kitten, which she named Organic. Time moved forward imperceptibly, and Julia went home in high spirits because today was her birthday. She was 29 years old. She was holding a bouquet of flowers in a bag containing a coffee set. All this was presented to the girl by the team of the culinary center, where Julia worked. The young woman anticipated how now she would come home and have tea with Ogonyok, who had long since grown from a kitten into a big fluffy cat. Julia had long since gotten used to celebrating her birthday alone at home. The next day after work, the woman decided to run to the store to buy a bouquet of artificial flowers for her late mother. Julia went to the grave twice a year. It was on her parents' day and on Selena's birthday. Exactly 10 days later, the girl's mother's birthday was coming up. She bought white gladioli, the flowers Selena especially loved. And soon the young woman was sitting at a table near her mother's grave. Julia took out of the bag of cookies that she had baked the day before and a handful of chocolates. She put all the sweets on the table and stuck the flowers in the ground near the monument. Then she carefully wiped the photo of her mother and said affectionately, "Hello, my dear. Here I came to congratulate you on your birthday. How are you in heaven? Probably watching me, and every time you ask me when my daughter will get married. Mammy, don't worry. As soon as I fall in love, I'll become a family man, but right now I've had enough of the red-headed rascal. By the way, he already weighs almost 5.5 pounds. Can you imagine how I fattened him up with sweets? Obunik, I have a good boy, always a gentle meal welcomes from work." The girl talked for a while and then rose from the bench and went to the monument, where she tenderly kissed the photo of her mother and already said the words of farewell and wanted to leave, as she was called by a man's voice. "I am sorry, for God's sake, for disturbing you. I just heard you talking affectionately with a relative." "Eavesdropping is not nice," calmly replied the girl. "I didn't do it, just you were engrossed in your monologue and did not notice me. And here behind you I was visiting my father. He was buried yesterday. And this is your mother. I understand," the stranger said. "I'm sorry for your father's loss." "Yes, this is my mother," Julia said in a steady voice. "A very beautiful woman, and you look just like her," said the stranger. "Beauty did not help her keep her husband's love," said the young woman. "Do you think that the appearance of a person is the main thing in the relationship of spouses?" asked the young man, surprised. "I do not know, and in general, I have no desire to philosophize on this topic," strictly pronounced the girl, and headed for the exit from the cemetery. Julia did not even look at the interlocutor at the moment of a short dialogue. Meanwhile, the man caught up with the young woman and asked permission to escort her. The girl at this request stopped abruptly and only then looked at the guy and said, "Maybe you will leave me alone. I kind of made it clear to you that I do not need neither escorts nor interlocutors. I ask you to leave me alone and not to pursue me." "And you are a prickly hedgehog," said the stranger, laughing, and added, "Apparently, you have been offended by some strongmen of the stronger sex. I just wanted to talk to a beautiful girl and nothing more. Will you change your anger into mercy? Or I'll think that your name is Kai," the guy said softly. "Why Kai?" the girl asked, perplexed. "Didn't you read fairy tales as a child? This is a character from the fairy tale, The Snow Queen. He was enchanted, and instead of a heart, he became an ice flake," said the man. "But that's a man's name." "Am I so masculine?" said the girl and laughed, and then continued, "You know how to compliment young ladies." "Pardon me, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that this is the only fairy tale that came to mind in which there is a character with an icy heart. By the way, and laughter suits you better than the stern tone with which you all the time before you answered me cordially," said the stranger. "Don't suck up now," said the young woman with a smile. "Wow, you have a very charming smile. And yet I insist on a little walk in this lovely weather. I promise I won't be intrusive," said the boy affably. "All right. My name is Julia," said the girl. "You impress me more and more every minute. You have a beautiful, rare name. My name is Oliver. Nice to meet you. By the way, I'm on an iron horse. If you want to ride, we can ride. You said to go for a walk, and now you're changing your shoes so quickly. That won't do," said the girl. "You have surprised me once again. The thing is that I really wanted you to refuse to ride in a car and prefer a walk in the fresh air. I'm not from around here, so I'm putting the navigation course in your hands. Command, and I will obey you with pleasure," said the new acquaintance. The couple left the cemetery and followed the path through a small grove. The girl asked the young man to tell her about himself. Oliver gladly told about himself. From the companion's story, the young woman learned that the man was 26 years old. He was an entrepreneur. He and his mother owned a cafe and restaurant. Oliver also said that his father left them several years ago to another woman and moved to live in this city. The guy said that he maintained good relations with his father, as well as with his new wife. Oliver himself lives in New York and recently called his father's wife and reported, "I'll be here for a few more days. Can I talk to you some more? I don't think I scared you with my conversation, and you have intrigued me with one more thing, that you boasted that you are a skilled pastry chef. How can I verify that?" The girl answered easily and dictated the address where she worked and said that she made all the pastries that were sold there. Oliver promised that he would visit the place tomorrow. And after that, the couple parted. Coming home, the young woman thought about her new acquaintance and noted that for the first time in so many years she liked this man. However, immediately after that she remembered about her father and then about her first love, and all thoughts of Julia then about the pleasant acquaintance evaporated. The next day the young woman went to work. She completely forbade herself to think about Oliver, and she managed to do it up to a certain point. At the end of the working day, Julia was summoned to the hall from the kitchen by a saleswoman who said conspiratorially, "And you're being called into the hall as an expert on sweets. What kind of nonsense?" asked perplexed girl, but went out in the wake of the saleswoman. And then Julia was stunned because she saw yesterday's new acquaintance, who stood with a beautiful bouquet of orchids. The young woman was stunned, as she did not expect Oliver to come to the cookery. Meanwhile, the man asked her to recommend the most delicious cake at the pastry chef's discretion. Julia at first did not realize that the treat the guy wanted to buy only after learning her preference. The girl advised the cake carrot, which in cooking was sold at hurrah. Oliver handed the flowers to the young woman and then bought the proposed goods, and then he quietly said, "I'm waiting for you near the entrance," and after that, without waiting for an answer, left the room. Julia barely waited until the end of the working day. She wanted to reprimand her new acquaintance that the guy embarrassed her in front of the cooking staff. And only when she was about to leave the room, the young woman suddenly heard the squeak of a kitty cat. She looked at Oliver and froze in surprise as the young man was holding a beautiful lop-eared cat in his hands. The guy approached the girl and said with a smile, "It is not good for your fire to live alone, so here is his life friend. But I will take a promise from you that you will present the first copy of The Offspring to me. Okay?" Julia stood staring at Oliver in confusion. She hadn't expected this surprise. And when she saw the friendly smile disappear from the man's face, and he looked as confused as she did, she suddenly laughed. Oliver stood near the girl and did not know how to behave in such a situation. This circumstance made the young woman laugh even more and only heartily amused Julia. And as soon as she was able to calm down from laughter, she said, "You should see yourself now. I was going to scold you, and your confused look threw me off. Where did you get that cute little cat?" "I found it in an ad. I thought you did not like the breed," quietly said the guy and smiled back. The couple walked around the city again, and the man did not offer the girl a ride in the car. Close to 9 in the evening, Julia muttered that it was time for her to go home. Oliver looked questioningly at the cat, letting her know what to do with this pet. The girl laughed again and said that she would take her to her place, and after that she hid in the entryway with the cat. Coming home, the girl looked out the window and saw the guy standing there looking at the windows. She smiled, stroked the kitty, and thought about this acquaintance. She chased away negative thoughts about how she had a failed relationship with her first man and wanted things to work out well with Oliver. When the girl realized that she was involuntarily thinking of her new acquaintance as her spouse, she was greatly frightened. The woman did not want to experience any more disappointments in life, since the past relationship she had to endure too hard. Oliver met Julia for 3 days from work, and they went for a walk. The guy wondered how the kitty was feeling and asked what she had named the little tigress. Julia replied that she had given the cat the nickname Cleopatra. Oliver was surprised and asked why, and the interlocutor laughed and replied that the cat built her cat, and the pet does not leave the bedroom. Soon the guy reported his departure and asked for permission to call the girl. She did not respond with a refusal, as she herself was drawn into the relationship. Julia liked talking to the young man. She felt ease with him, but somewhere in her subconscious lived that this man was using her for his own purposes. Soon the guy left, and the girl became sad. She missed these simple relationships where there is no hint of bed scenes, as it was with the first man, Harry. The young woman, after the departure of the man, often looked at the display of the phone. She was afraid to miss the call of the guy, but he did not call. It had been a month since she had broken up with Oliver, and she hadn't heard from him. Julia at that moment thought, here is another disappointment in men, as the melody in the phone rang and the young woman recognized the number of the guy. The girl, trying to hide her excitement, answered, listening. Again this voice without friendliness. No, you definitely cannot be left alone for a long time. Tell me, how are Cleopatra and Lightning? Did our friends get along? Oliver said. Yes, they're sleeping together. Where have you been? Are you all right? The young woman said. I can sense the anxiety in your voice. Do you miss your friend? The boy said. This answer of the guy immediately cooled the girl's joy because he called her a friend. She discreetly said that she was just worried. Her mood immediately caught the interlocutor and said that there was a little problem and he could not call. The girl coldly accepted the explanation, and then Oliver said that in a couple of days he would be in her city. And after a while Oliver arrived. He specially did not inform the girl when he would arrive. The guy wanted to be a surprise for her. And this young man succeeded, because when Julia came out of the cookery and saw Oliver, she quietly awed. The man stood near the car and held a gorgeous bouquet of flowers. The guy stayed in town for 3 days and soon left again. All this time the couple had been dating. They were just chatting, and there was not even a hint of intimacy between them. Julia realized that she missed this man, but she didn't know how to behave with Oliver. She kept having flashbacks of her relationship with the first man who used her. This time, the guy called the young woman every day after he left and was interested in her business. The young woman was waiting for the young man to come to their town again. She suddenly unknowingly asked at the next phone call, "When to expect you?" This question sounds exciting. And you answer it yourself. "When do you want to see me?" Pronounced the guy. "Right now, but I know it's impossible. Come quietly," answered the girl. "Okay, my love," said the guy and disconnected the connection. The girl, after these words for a long time, came to her senses. She had just been called beloved by the guy, and it was said sincerely. And Oliver arrived 2 days later. It was a meeting of two lovers. Young people rushed into each other's arms. At this point, the girl no longer thought that she was acting rashly. She just asked the guy to stay with her for the night. The morning Julia woke up alone. She was stunned by this circumstance, as she did not expect that the beloved person, and that Oliver is beloved. She no longer doubted that the guy would leave her like that after a loving embrace. The young woman covered her face with her palms and cried desperately as she suddenly heard the lock on the front door turn. Julia tensed, and at that moment saw Oliver, who came in with a bouquet of flowers and said quietly, I didn't get there in time. You're already awake. I wanted to give you a nice surprise, but it didn't work out." "Silly, come here," quietly whispered Julia, who from happiness that seized her lover, tears appeared in her eyes. The guy came and gently hugged the girl, and at the same time whispered in her ear, "Not at all good your city, as nowhere jewelry at 6 in the morning does not work, but only flower stalls. I propose to you to be my spouse. I love you, but I apologize for offering to marry me without a ring. Are you serious now?" Julia asked, but looking at Oliver realized that the guy was speaking sincerely, and the woman suddenly cried. The man hugged his beloved and quietly said, "You will not get rid of me now, as I have been looking for such a woman for a long time." And then the man began to outline a plan of action for the future. He informed his beloved that he was leaving in a couple of days and would come back as soon as he could. But for Julia, Oliver took the girl's word that during his absence, she would definitely quit her job, pack the most necessary things, and prepare for the move. The young woman looked at the guy confusedly. The man, seeing the confusion of her beloved, gently said to her, "Trust me and we will be fine. And I will also make you a gift for the wedding. You will have your own department of confectionery in the cafe, where you can create your own cupcakes, cakes, and so on." After a while, Julia was taken by Oliver, and now she is already in a 3-room apartment where the guy lives with his mother. Acquaintance with the lover's mother, Aurora, passed neutrally. The owner of the apartment did not express any particular joy at the meeting with the future daughter-in-law. The woman held herself with restraint. A couple of days later, Oliver took the girl to get acquainted with his grandmother, who lived a couple of blocks from the grandson. Julie, at the meeting with the future relative of Cassie, immediately felt from the old woman dislike towards herself. The girl couldn't explain where the feeling came from. However, Julia was right in her conclusions. As soon as Casey learned that the chosen grandchild works as a pastry chef, she exclaimed, "A cook? What a horror! Oliver, couldn't you find a decent girl to marry?" "Grandma, calm down. Julia is not a cook, but a confectioner, and soon she will bake you a cake that you have never tasted because it is incredibly delicious," said the guy. When the couple left the guests, the young man asked his beloved not to pay attention to the words of his grandmother. Oliver explained that Casey is an eccentric woman and sometimes she gets carried away in her judgments. Julia listened to the young man and nodded in agreement, although she thought mentally that they were unlikely to have friendly relations with his relative. Sometime later, the young people had a wedding where there were many people. Julia was very embarrassed at the celebration, as she was not used to large crowds of people. This was seen by her lover, who encouraged his chosen one with affectionate words. After the wedding, Oliver, as promised to his beloved, arranged it in a cafe, where the young woman had a small department of confectionery. Julia rejoiced like a child that everything in her life has changed so abruptly for the better. A year passed after the wedding. The young people lived soul to soul between them, and as something, Oliver started a conversation with his wife about real estate. The guy said, "Listen, I have a proposition for you. You have an empty apartment in your city. Maybe you sell it and open your own bakery store here with the money from the sale of real estate. I'm just saying that in the very near future, we're going to have kids and we need to take care of them. Don't reject my offer right away, but think about it and remember I'm not imposing it on you." Julia thought for a few minutes and then realized that her husband was 100% right. She smiled and said, "I agree. And you are already thinking about children. Of course, children are our future and we should also contribute to it," said the young man and kissed his wife on the lips. After a while, the plan of the young people was realized in reality. The couple opened a small confectionery store where Julia became the owner. Years flew imperceptibly and 6 years passed as the wedding thundered. The couple were happy. Only one thing that saddened them was that they had no children. Julia went to several clinics during this time, but the doctors spread their hands, saying that with her health is all right. The woman would have been happy to talk to her mother-in-law about it, but there was no trust between them, which also made Julia sad. Aurora, immediately after Oliver's marriage, made it clear to her new relative that she tolerated her only because of her son's choice. Oliver saw that the wife is worried about the lack of children in the family, and once offered to take a child from an orphanage. Julia, a few days of reflection, and came to the conclusion that there is nothing wrong with this idea. She, together with her husband, will give some kid a happy childhood. The woman even thought, who she wants more, boy or girl, and with this question turned to her husband. "What sex of the child do you want?" "I do not care. You can have a girl and a boy at once," smiling, Oliver said in response. The couple chose the day of the trip to the orphanage, but because of Julia's indisposition, this event had to be postponed. The woman got up in the morning and felt nauseous. She barely had time to run to the restroom before she threw up. Julia had barely worked at the store that day. The woman came home depressed. Her mother-in-law noticed her pale appearance and Aurora inquired about her symptoms. Julia answered as is, and then the landlady discreetly said, "All your signs clearly indicate that you are in an interesting position. To be sure, buy a pregnancy test." Julia froze after her mother-in-law's words. The woman slapped herself on the forehead. How could she not have realized it herself? Julia ran up to Snezhana Vitalievna to kiss her on the cheek, but her mother-in-law did not allow her to do so. The daughter-in-law was a little shaken by this circumstance, but she immediately threw away these thoughts and began to get ready to go to the pharmacy. Just an hour later, Julia already knew that she was pregnant. It was indicated by a positive test. The woman gently put her hands on her stomach and thought that finally fate had given her and her husband a gift. Julia waited for her husband from work to tell him the good news. As soon as Oliver came home, the wife approached him and quietly said, "We need to talk. This morning you were gloomy because you were worried about something, but now you are shining like a Christmas tree. Let's go talk with a smile," said the man. As soon as the couple went to their room, Julia gently hugged her spouse and in her ear said, "We will not go to the orphanage for a child, as I am in a position, which means you will soon become a father, and I will become a mom." The man stood for a few minutes, realizing the news, and then picked up his beloved in his arms and spun around the room. And at that, Oliver only repeated one phrase, "We're going to have a baby. We're having a baby." The couple decided that in a week, they would go to the Women's Counseling Center for the woman to register for pregnancy and childbirth. Oliver immediately informed his wife, "You will give birth in my presence. I will support you. You're a businessman, but maybe I'm against it," said the beloved, smiling happily. A few days passed and the couple went by car to the antenatal clinic. Julia wanted to take a detour to the clinic, but Oliver said that they would only lose time, so he chose a shorter route, and that decision cost him his life. Their foreign car was hit at high speed by an SUV driven by a drunk driver. What happened next for Julia was a blur. Initially, she lost consciousness, woke up when she saw how she was pulled out of the car, and again passed out. The woman did not regain consciousness until several days later. Julia was lying in a hospital bed under an IV. She wanted to call for a nurse, but her lips only made a whistling sound. The woman tried again, but the result was the same. Julia wanted to get up and immediately realized that she couldn't do that. At the moment, the woman was only interested in the fate of her husband and the future baby. She prayed to God that her spouse would not be hurt and the baby inside her. Julia didn't know how long she lay like that. The woman lost track of time. And when she saw a man in a white coat coming in, she was overjoyed. She tried to say something, but again there was only a guttural sound. The doctor looked at the patient and said, "You've come to your senses. It's already good, so you'll live. Then your relatives will come to you soon." And after these words, the doctor left. Julia wanted to shout for the doctor to stop and tell everything, but she could not do it. The woman was terrified that she couldn't do anything in this situation. She at this point felt like a mere vegetable just lying there. An hour later, the mother-in-law and her mother Casey entered the room. The two women approached Julia and looked at her carefully. The patient wanted to ask many questions again, but as the first time she could only mumble unintelligibly. Aurora shuddered in disgust at these sounds and said, "You lie here chilling, and now my son has found a shelter under the cold earth. It's your fault for his death. If not for your pregnancy, Oliver would not have gone to this women's clinic. I didn't want Julia as a relative right away. I told Oliver that when he met that cook, but my boy wouldn't listen to his grandmother. And this is the result. I felt in my subconscious that Julia would bring misfortune to our family. It's a good thing she lost the baby, or she'd have given birth to a freak after all this," Casey said. The flow of accusations of the two women was interrupted by the doctor, who greeted the visitors and congratulated them on the fact that their relative had recovered. The mother-in-law wrinkled her nose at the doctor's words and mumbled, "Does she understand us?" "I think so," said the man in the white coat, and then turned to Julia. "If you can hear me, blink twice." The patient complied with the doctor's request. The doctor turned to her mother-in-law and made it clear to the woman that Julia could hear everything, but she could not speak. Aurora immediately asked the next question. How long will she be moving like that? And will Julia even be able to move on her own? "I can tell you only one thing, that this woman is lucky to have made it out at all," said the doctor, and then began to explain in medical terms in what condition the patient was lying. From all this, Julia realized that she had a head injury, so her speech was impaired, as well as many fractures, but she would be able to move, but only with the help of a cane. After his explanations, the doctor added that the patient would stay in the hospital for at least 2 months, and then the man in the white coat left. The mother-in-law looked thoughtfully at her daughter-in-law for a while and then turned to her mother. "I'm thinking, why do we need this Julia at all? Why do we have to go to the hospital to visit her and spend money on her? And also after discharge, she will have to be taken care of and maybe even hire a special caregiver. Mom, do you have any idea how much that would cost?" "I can only imagine, daughter. And you'll have to look at all this," said Cassie in response. "No, I don't like it," Aurora said and looked at her daughter-in-law, who was trying to say something. "It would be easier to give her up and put her in a mental institution," Oliver's grandmother said, and then added, "Julia will be out of business now, because all she can do is mumble. Your daughter needs to pay the doctor to declare her incompetent, and then Julia will be sent to a mental hospital, and the candy store will be transferred to you, as well as your son's cafe. You'll be able to use your income to go abroad, because you've been dreaming of it for ages. And your mom says the right things. It is easier to pay the doctor once than later to give money for the care of this provincial mother-in-law said. And after this conversation, the two women left the room. Julia, after all that she had heard, realized with horror what fate awaited her in the near future. The woman felt a sharp pain in the chest area where the heart is located and immediately lost consciousness. Julia only a month later learned that after leaving from all the experience she had a heart attack. The woman already at that time could sit, move only her left hand, as the right was paralyzed after the heart attack. A month after the accident, Julia's mother-in-law came to see her only twice while she was in the hospital. Aurora showed up the day she was discharged. Julia mentally rejoiced that Oliver's mother had changed her mind and had come to take her home from the hospital. However, the woman was greatly mistaken in her jubilation, because on the way out she saw an ambulance and then heard Snezhana Vitalivna's words. "It is your punishment that now there is no my son alive. You will live in a mental hospital, that's where you belong. You are already a cripple anyway, you walk with a stick, you can't speak, and your right arm hangs like a whip. You need special care, and that's what they'll give you at the hospital for the mentally ill." Julia tried to go to the side and scream, but two orderlies came to her and took the woman under her arms and put her in the car. Julia looked with horror at her mother-in-law, but she stood there smiling indifferently. At that moment, Julia thought why Oliver's mother hated her so much, because she had done nothing wrong to her, and tears ran down her cheeks. Julia was placed in a psychiatric boarding school, in a ward where 5 other patients were still lying. The woman tried to gesture to the nurse to show that she was not mentally disturbed. The girl in a white coat did not understand anything and said in an orderly voice, "Sick, go to your room and do not wave your hand in front of my nose. If you disobey, we have punishments for rowdies." Julia did not dare to disobey and leaned on her cane and walked to her room. She decided to wait for the doctor to explain the situation. The doctor came in and the woman made gestures with her hand. The man in the white coat looked at her indifferently and then instructed the nurse to add another medicine for the patient. Julia gestured for a piece of paper and a pencil. The doctor provided it to her, and she scribbled, "Healthy." The doctor laughed and muttered, "Everyone here says that," and with these words, he went to another patient. Julia made many attempts to explain to the doctor or nurse that she was a normal person. However, all her attempts to prove that she was an adequate person failed. The woman was desperate, not knowing how to escape from this hell. Julia felt that being with people who had mental illnesses, she could go crazy herself. To prevent this from happening, she decided to learn to write with her left hand as well as her right. The woman discreetly stole a notebook from the nurse on duty and a pen. Stealing was contrary to Julia's principles, but in this case she had no choice, as it was not allowed to give the sick items for writing. The girl began to train her left hand every day. She wanted to write a note so that she could then pass the message to the prosecutor's office. True, the woman did not know how she would do it, being in a psychiatric boarding school. Week after week went by, and several months flew by imperceptibly. During this time, Julia was able to write with her left hand more readily. Now she only needed a blank sheet of paper to write a letter, so she went in search of it. She took a moment when the nurse stepped back and grabbed the notebook, but this action was noticed by the technician, who had been watching the patient for a long time. Lucy, the janitor, came over and said quietly, "Put it back if you don't want trouble." Julia glanced fearfully at the technician and put the notebook down. Lucy, in the same quiet voice, asked the woman to follow her. The cleaning lady went into the small room where the household supplies were kept, followed by Julia. Once the two women were alone, Lucy spoke up. "I've been watching you for a long time. You keep to yourself. You react to words quite appropriately. I've been working here for over 10 years and I've seen a lot. Something tells me you're not a psychopath." Julia nodded happily and then gestured for her to write. The cleaning lady took out a notebook from her purse and handed it to the woman with the words, "Go ahead and write your memoirs." Julia squatted down and began to write. After about 10 minutes, she handed Lucy a sheet torn from the notebook with an inscription that read, "I'm not here of my own free will. I need to write a letter to the prosecutor's office to get me out of here. My mother-in-law put me here after the accident. She did it to take my candy store and because she hates me." "Well, you and stupid," with a grin, said the technician, and continued, "Who will read your letter in the prosecutor's office if it is written in a psychiatric hospital? You won't get anywhere with this method. Nobody wants to listen to you here, and you want to get into the authorities. Straight path is not your destiny in this situation. Especially, I understand that your mother-in-law is not a poor woman, isn't she?" Julia nodded her head. Lucy looked at her companion and felt sorry for the woman. The cleaning lady handed the notebook to Julia and said, "Briefly write your destiny. And don't forget to write down if you have any relatives." At the word relatives, Julia immediately shook her head in the negative. The technician nodded and said, "Well, you're right, and I'll see what I can do to help you." Julia smiled and tears rolled down her cheeks. At that moment, Lucy fully believed that she was looking at an adequate person. The cleaning lady patted the woman's arm and told her not to get too excited. At that moment, Julia had a ray of hope that she could get out of here. But at the same second, the woman thought, where would she go after this boarding school? Julia thought for a long time and then decided that the most important thing now was to get out of here first, and everything else later. Lucy twirled the note from the girl in her hands. She wondered how she could help this poor woman, and the first thing that came to mind was to talk to Julia's mother-in-law. The cleaning lady got Snezhana Vitalivna's phone number from Julia and dialed her. A few minutes after talking to the girl's mother-in-law, Lucy realized that this woman hates Julia with all her soul. So the cleaner did not waste time on an empty conversation and disconnected the connection. A few days later, Julia brought the technician a notebook all written out. Lucy read it and wept. She realized that this woman's life was not sugar and there was no help for her. The orphanage worker thought about how she could help Julia, and the only thing that came to her mind was to escape. The cleaning lady approached Julia. "Do you have someone who can take you in?" "Don't answer that now. Think carefully. You only have one way out, is to run away from here and start a new life." Julie thought about the words of her interlocutor. When the woman went to bed, she involuntarily remembered the technician's phrase about straight roads. And then Julia, like an electric shock, was struck by this phrase. She immediately remembered what the witch had told her. Straight roads are not for her. She remembered that she had asked him to take a detour before the accident, but Oliver had believed that his route would be faster. Julia blamed herself overnight for not insisting on her decision then. If she had made her husband heed her words at that moment, the man she loved would still be alive. After all this realization about straight roads, the woman realized that she had only one way out, and that was to go to the witch again. Perhaps the witch doctor would help her in something. Only after that Julia fell asleep peacefully. In the morning, the woman came to Lucy and wrote on a piece of paper that she had such a person whom she could trust. The technician nodded satisfactorily and said, "As soon as the moment is favorable, then I'll get you out of here. I'll give you money and food for the journey. You'll get there by train, because you don't have a passport, and I can't get one. Just promise me that as soon as you get to the place, let your witch doctor inform me about it, as I will not worry about you." It was decided that in a week Lucy would secretly take Julia outside the boarding school and help her get on the train. However, an unpleasant event occurred. The technician was walking to work, tripped and unsuccessfully broke her leg in 2 places. The elderly woman was admitted to the hospital. She asked her husband to go to the boarding school and warned Julia that the plan will have to be postponed for some time. Lucy's recovery was delayed for almost 6 months. As soon as the woman appeared in the boarding school, a smile immediately appeared on Julia's face. She realized that very soon her imprisonment among mentally retarded people would end. And it happened exactly a week after Lucy went to work. The 2 women stood on the platform afterward and hugged each other with tears in their eyes. The technician admonished Julia and asked her to take care of herself. And soon the woman got into the car and waved goodbye to her savior. Sitting in the train, Julia could not believe that she had escaped from the cursed boarding school, where she had spent almost 2 years. The woman looked out the window and wondered what awaited her in the future. At the sound of the wheels, Julia fell asleep. Some time later, the woman woke up and discovered that money was missing from the patch pocket of her sweater. She cried involuntarily, for once again she had been punished by fate for something. When they announced her stop, the woman got off the train and decided that no matter what, she would get to the witch doctor. And Julia did it, though she had to go where she had to hare, where she had to hitchhike, and sometimes she had to walk. The road to the witch took the woman almost 3 weeks. And now Julia comes in dirty clothes to the witch doctor's house. The woman knocks quietly and Maria opens the door, who immediately recognized the visitor, who had been there many years ago. The sorceress takes a look at Julia and says, "As I said, life has taken its toll on you. I can see that you want help from me, and you will get it. But first lie down on the ground and listen to her, and then report what you hear or feel." The woman obediently lay down on the ground and put her ear to the ground. She stayed in that position for a few minutes, and then rose sharply and looked fearfully at the mistress of the house. The witch, seeing the woman's reaction, said with a smile, "The earth is whispering to you that it is under your control. You heard it, didn't you?" Julia nodded affirmatively, and the witch doctor spoke further. "I told you the first time I met you that I feel the power that God has given you. Only you need to reveal your gift. Now give me your hand to see how I can help you." Julia immediately gave Maria her hand and looked expectantly at the old woman, who closed her eyes and whispered quietly. This action took place for about 5 minutes, and then the witch released her hand and said, "Your speech will be restored, but you will not speak clearly. Your right arm will move, but the limp will remain. But all this will happen not in a week, and not even in a month. It will take time. Now you will have to dig up some earth and listen to what she tells you every day, but do not tell anyone about it. If you act contrary to it, your gift will be lost and you will have trouble in life." The witch paused and looked at the woman attentively and spoke again. "You will live with me. Now go to the bathhouse and wash off the road dust, and only then I will feed you. You will live according to my rules here, and if you don't like it, you can, like my daughter, run away to another hut." From that time, Julia began to live with Maria. She fully complied with all the recommendations of the old woman, drank infusions of herbs, made lotions on the hand, and at the same time studied Snakarsvo. And after 2 months, Julia was able to move the fingers of her right hand. And after another month, she was able to say a few words, though, which were difficult to understand. But this circumstance did not spoil the woman's mood at all, but only gave her strength that it is necessary to continue moving in this direction. A year later, Julia had already fully moved her hand and spoke quite well. She praised herself that she had made the right decision to go to the witch for help. One thing that saddened the woman was that she had no time to thank the cleaning lady for her escape, because Lucy died of a stroke 6 months after Julia had left the boarding school. It had been 13 years since Julia had taken up residence with the witch doctor. During this time, the woman learned to heal some diseases with the help of the earth, on which she made incantations. With the help of her gift, Julia received food or small sums of money as a token of gratitude from people. Every 3 years, the woman traveled to the city to visit her mother's grave. Here she talked with her mother, and at the same time talked with her late husband, whom she still loved very much. One day, Julia was called by a witch doctor who said she had something important to talk about. Maria looked at her ward and said, "I'll be gone very soon. Now, don't interrupt me. You will have one more trial in your life, but I can't tell you exactly what it is, because it concerns my line, and we can never know anything about ourselves, so be prepared for that. But I think you can handle it, as you are a strong woman. I told you that you will help other people, and you are doing it, so you will be able to cope with any trial. I can see that. You don't need to grieve for me, as I have lived a decent life, and I am not ashamed of any of my deeds. And one more thing, I advise you to let go of your resentment towards your father. He is not guilty of anything, just your dad loved another woman. It happens in life, and it's not his fault." "You just sounded like my late ex-husband," Julia said quietly. "So your husband was a wise man and his heart was good," said Maria. After this conversation, the witch passed away a little less than 6 months later. Julia wanted to cry when the old woman was buried, but she remembered her mentor's words that it was not necessary to grieve for her, so she held on and did not shed a single tear. At that moment, Julia exhaled and turned to the neighbor from the first floor. "And then you already know everything. Your son helped me carry the bags of earth up to the 5th floor, for which I am very grateful. Your Austin is growing up to be a decent man." "Wait, this is not the whole story, as I did not understand why you now live in this house, and not in the house of the witch. She said to stay you there." Amazed, asked the boy's mother. "That's a separate story, although I'm not telling the truth. My mentor has a daughter who did not get along with her when Maria was alive. So as soon as the witch died, her daughter showed up on the doorstep and ordered me to get out. I had nothing to do to fulfill this order because I was not registered in the house. I had no rights to housing. So I moved to the city, where I rented an apartment on the 5th floor." "Wait, what do you live on? You don't work, you don't receive disability pension. What do you live on?" the interlocutor said in surprise. "On what people give in gratitude. I help the sick I can cure, and they either bring me food or give me money. That's why I need the land. It is my breadwinner and my helper." With a smile, said the old woman. "What a hard fate you have. And you survived and did not break. I do not even know if I could resist all the trials that fell on your share," said Leslie. The woman paused for a few minutes, and then explained, "So you're going to live like this all your life? I mean, without a passport, without social security, because you have a pension. I'm a small man in this world, and I'm very afraid that if I start to restore my passport, I'll be put back in a boarding school for the mentally ill, and there to live, not sugar. I'd rather exist like a mouse than go back there with tears in my eyes," said the old woman. "Stop. You've been through so much and now you're passing up. It's not gonna work. My mom is a cardiologist and believe me, she has good connections. First, you will restore your passport and then pass the examination, where you will be removed from this diagnosis that you are a mentally retarded woman. The main thing is, don't be afraid of anything. You have to be strong now. I just didn't know before that you had been through such a life ordeal. And I can tell you that your neighbors really think you are a strange person, and I thought so too until today. And I am grateful to my son that he looked into your bag and told me about everything, because if not caustic, you would have continued to live like this. Please do not argue with me with heat," said the young woman. "Now I understand in whom your son weighed character. As they say, the apple does not fall far from the tree, it is just your case. I don't know what to say to your proposal," Julia said, and covered her face with her palms and cried silently. The neighbor from the first floor came to the old woman and hugged her. Leslie understood now the state of her interlocutor. After that, the boy's mother said goodbye to the old woman, but promised that tomorrow she would visit her and tell her what else could be done in this situation. Julia thanked the neighbor and lastly said, "You're going to be pregnant very soon. I wish God could hear you say that. My husband and I have wanted it for a long time, but all that does not work out," said with sadness Leslie. "Believe me, I don't just say anything," said the old woman. The neighbor from the first floor returned home, where her husband was already waiting for her, who knew from his son where the wife was. The man looked questioningly at his wife, and she began to talk about the fate of their neighbor from above. The head of the family listened attentively to the other half, and then said, "With one we can already help this poor woman, but I have a counter-proposal. If already help, then to the end. From your story, I understood that her mother-in-law took away her business, that is, recognized Julia incapacitated, and it was a fraud on her part, and it's possible to get it all out in the open. That's what we'll have my friend Jacob do. He's a lawyer. I don't think he's gonna say no when he finds out the details of this case. We'll get the store back to her if her mother-in-law is still alive and hasn't sold the business. But if she did, it'll be more expensive for her because she'll have to pay the money back. It'll be great if we can make this work. Julia deserves to live like a human being and not to sit and be afraid that she may be put in the asylum again," said her wife, and immediately added, "Honey, can I run to make her happy? Because she also told me today happy news. You may not believe her, but I do. Our neighbor told me that I'm going to be pregnant." Leslie, without waiting for an answer, rushed upstairs to Julia's apartment. As soon as she was opened by an elderly woman, the mother of the boy told the landlady that she will now be helped by many people. And also the neighbor from the first floor added that the mother-in-law will definitely get what she deserves for her greed and evil deeds. And only Leslie wanted to leave, has suddenly stopped and asked, "And you forgave your father that he left you for another woman?" "Yes," quietly answered Julia. The couple from the first floor were indeed able to help the elderly woman. They managed to get Julia's diagnosis of mental illness removed and helped her to get her passport restored, and at the same time to get back the pastry store that was still operating. A neighbor from the first floor suggested that the former mother-in-law be criminally punished, but the elderly woman said, "Don't. She is the mother of my favorite person. May God be her judge." Leslie was once again surprised by her neighbor, whom she considered a strong woman, and soon Austin's mother actually found out she was expecting her second child. And Julia sold the store and bought a place in her hometown and continued to help people heal illnesses with the help of earth and herbs.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.